My fiancé, Liam, put his hand on my arm, his fingers giving a gentle, warning squeeze. "Don't react," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against the cheerful chatter of the party. "Just watch her." I followed his gaze across the manicured lawn to where my sister Claire was holding court. She was laughing, her hands gesturing wildly as she recounted a story to our cousins. Her new designer handbag, the one I'd bought her as a ridiculously extravagant "congratulations on your new job present," was perched on the table. But it wasn't the bag that made my stomach clench. It was the words I could just barely make out, carried on the breeze. And so I just thought, you know, I've worked so hard. I deserve to treat myself. And that's when I knew. The $10,000 wasn't a loan. It was a story she was telling, and I wasn't even a character in it. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. To understand the $10,000, you have to understand my family. It's not a straightforward equation of love and support. It's more like a complex piece of algebra where I was always the variable they solved for. My parents, bless their hearts, are masters of a particular brand of passive financial desperation. They aren't bad people, not really. They're just careless. They live in a state of perpetual low-grade crisis, always one broken appliance or unexpected bill away from a meltdown. And my sister, Claire, she's the masterpiece they created. She's the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one whose dreams were always underwritten by my pragmatism. I was the responsible one, the planner, the saver, Victoria, the sensible one. It was a role I never auditioned for, but was cast in from birth. While Claire was taking ballet and art classes, I was learning how to balance a checkbook. While she was going on backpacking trips through Europe, finding herself, I was working a second job to build a safety net. Not just for me, but for all of us. It was the unspoken rule. Claire gets the experiences, Victoria gets the responsibility. For years I didn't even question it. It was just the weather. The sun rose in the east, the tides went in and out, and I bailed out my family. It was a constant. I was the designated driver at a demolition derby, and I never once asked for gas money. I just kept the car running, patched the dents, and made sure everyone got home in one piece, even if they'd spent the whole night trying to crash. This time, though, felt different. This wasn't a few $100s for a car repair or $1,000 to cover a forgotten tax bill. This was $10,000, a number with enough weight to change things. A number that should have come with a contract and a notary public, not a tearful hug and a whispered promise of, "I'll pay you back, I swear." The request had come, as they always did, cloaked in drama and urgency. Claire had gotten a new job, a fantastic opportunity she'd been working towards for years. I was genuinely proud of her, but the job was in a new city, and she needed to secure an apartment, buy furniture, and cover her expenses until her first paycheck. She presented it as a simple bridge loan, a temporary fix. My parents, of course, co-signed her performance with their usual chorus of, "Oh, Victoria, you're the only one who can help," and "We're a family, we have to support each other." Liam, my ever-observant, ever-grounded fiancé, had watched the whole exchange with a quiet intensity. He didn't say anything at the time, but later that night, as I was transferring the money, he'd asked a simple question that echoed in my head for weeks. "Do you think you're helping her? Or are you just making it easier for her not to grow up?" At the time, I'd brushed it off. It was family. It's what you do. But now, standing at that party, watching her lie so effortlessly, I realized Liam hadn't been asking a question. He'd been making a statement. The pattern started early. I must have been about 10 years old when I got my first real taste of it. There was a school trip to the capital city, a big deal for a bunch of kids from our small town. It cost $50, a fortune to me back then. I'd saved up for months, doing extra chores, collecting cans, hoarding my birthday money. I had it all tucked away in a shoebox under my bed. 2 days before the permission slip was due, my mum came into my room, her face a mask of strained cheerfulness. "Honey," she'd said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "You know your sister has that big dance competition coming up?" I nodded. It was all anyone had talked about for weeks. Claire's costume, Claire's routine, Claire's inevitable victory. "Well," my mum continued, twisting the ring on her finger, "there was a little mix-up with the entry fees, and we're a bit short. And her costume needs some last-minute alterations." I knew where this was going. I could feel the shoebox under my bed getting lighter with every word. I remember staring at the floral pattern on my comforter, trying to memorize it, trying to focus on anything other than the lump forming in my throat. I didn't offer the money. I didn't have to. It was assumed. My $50, my saved-up dreams of seeing the big city, were sacrificed for Claire's sequined tutu. I didn't go on the trip. I stayed home and helped my mom glue rhinestones onto that costume, my fingers sticky and my heart heavy. When Claire won first place, my parents showed the trophy to everyone, beaming with pride. "She's got so much talent," my dad would say. "She's going to be a star." No one ever mentioned my $50. It was a silent, unacknowledged investment in the family's designated star. That was the first time, but it was far from the last. It became a running theme. My first car, a clunky but reliable sedan I'd bought with my own money from my high school job, became the unofficial family taxi because Claire needed it for her social life. The laptop I'd saved for all through my freshman year of college was borrowed by Claire for a semester and returned with a cracked screen and a virus. Each time, the justification was the same. It was for the good of the family. Claire's needs were always presented as more urgent, more important. My achievements were quiet, personal things. Hers were public spectacles that required funding. I was the producer, she was the star, and our parents were the doting publicists. Looking back, I can see how skillfully they manipulated me. They used the language of love and obligation to mask their own irresponsibility. "We're a family," was their get-out-of-jail-free card. It meant their problems were my problems, but my successes were my own, to be enjoyed quietly so long as they didn't inconvenience anyone. They made me feel like being responsible was my superpower, my defining characteristic. And the more I did, the more they expected. They weren't just boiling a frog, they had me stoking the fire underneath the pot. They had convinced me that the scalding water was a warm, comforting bath. The $10,000 was supposed to be the last time, a clean break. I had told myself this, repeating it like a mantra as I clicked confirm on the bank transfer. Liam and I were saving for our own future. We wanted a house, a life that wasn't constantly being nibbled at by the financial black hole of my family. Giving Claire that money was a significant hit to our savings, a detour on our own roadmap. But I had justified it, to Liam and to myself, as a final investment. She has a real career now, I'd argued, more to convince myself than him. This is what she needs to finally get on her own 2 feet. Once she's settled, she can pay it back in installments. It's a good risk. Liam, to his credit, didn't fight me on it. He just nodded and said, "Okay, honey, but let's be clear. This is the last loan. After this, we're done." "Our future comes first," I agreed. I promised. I felt a surge of relief, as if I'd just signed a treaty ending a long and costly war. The first few weeks were promising. Claire moved to the new city, full of excitement. She sent me pictures of her empty apartment, asking for my opinion on paint colours and furniture layouts. She called me to complain about her new boss and gossip about her co-workers. It felt normal, sisterly. The money wasn't mentioned, but I didn't expect it to be, not right away. I gave her space, letting her settle in. I imagined her budgeting, setting up a payment plan, being the responsible adult she was supposedly becoming. The first crack in my fantasy appeared about a month after she moved. My mom called, her voice laced with that familiar, manufactured casualness that always preceded a request. "Victoria, honey, I was just talking to Claire. She's doing so well. But you know, she was saying how her apartment looks a little bare. I waited. And her birthday's coming up. Ah, there it was. I was thinking, my mum continued, maybe you could get her a nice housewarming and birthday gift. Like a really nice one. She saw this gorgeous designer rug that would just be perfect for her living room. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice even. I just gave her $10,000. That was for furniture and everything else she needed. There was a pause. Well, yes, my mum said, a hint of impatience in her tone. But that was for the basics. The necessities. This is a gift. Something special to show her you're proud of her. It was the logic of another universe. A universe where $10,000 is considered the basics, and where the person who provides it is then expected to provide more. I politely declined, saying Liam and I were on a tight budget. The guilt trip that followed was a masterclass. I was unsupportive. I wasn't celebrating my sister's success. I was being selfish. I ended the call feeling drained and angry. It was the first time I had said no to them, really said no to a significant request, and their reaction was swift and punishing. It was as if I had violated the natural order of things. Victoria, the sensible one, was suddenly being very, very unreasonable. The party was my parents' idea. A big, catered affair in their backyard to celebrate Claire's new life. A proper send-off, my dad had called it, even though she'd already been gone for 2 months. It was, of course, a thinly veiled attempt to show her off, to showcase their successful daughter. The invitations had a picture of Claire on them, smiling professionally. My name was mentioned only in the context of the RSVP contact. Please let Victoria know if you can make it. I was the event planner, the logistics coordinator, the unpaid assistant for the Claire show. Liam and I had driven down for the weekend, a knot of apprehension in my chest the entire way. I had a feeling the party would be a turning point, though I couldn't have articulated why. It was just a sense, a prickling on the back of my neck. The day was beautiful, sunny, and warm. My parents' garden was in full bloom. It was a perfect stage for the perfect family to perform their perfect play, and Claire was the star. She floated through the crowd of relatives and family friends, accepting congratulations, radiating a confidence that was brand new, and, I was beginning to realize, completely unearned. She looked fantastic, dressed head to toe in new, expensive clothes. And then I saw the handbag. It was a classic, a ridiculously pricey status symbol that I knew for a fact she couldn't afford on her new salary. Not unless she was eating instant noodles for the next 6 months. I felt a familiar pang of annoyance, but I pushed it down. Maybe it was a knockoff. Maybe she'd saved up. I was trying so hard to believe in the new, responsible Claire. I was mingling with my aunts, making small talk, when Liam found me. He didn't look angry. He looked calm, dangerously calm. That's when he put his hand on my arm and told me to watch her. I tuned out my aunt's story about her prize-winning roses and focused on my sister. She was talking to our younger cousins, their eyes wide with admiration. And then I heard it. The lie. So bold, so casual. I deserve to treat myself. She patted the expensive handbag. It's a reminder of how far I've come. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just the lie about the handbag. It was the implication behind it. If she was claiming the bag as her own hard-earned reward, what did that mean for the $10,000? My mind started racing, connecting the dots. The vague non-answers whenever I'd gently broached the subject of a repayment plan. The way she'd changed the subject when I'd asked how she was managing her finances. The housewarming gift request from my mom. It wasn't just a series of isolated incidents. It was a campaign. A coordinated effort to erase my contribution, to rewrite the narrative. I wasn't the supportive sister who'd given her a massive leg up. I was a footnote, an inconvenient detail to be scrubbed from the official story. The story wasn't, Victoria helped me get started. The story was, I did this all by myself. And as I stood there, watching her bask in the glow of her own fabricated success, I felt something inside me finally. Irrevocably. Snap. The quiet, accommodating part of me, the part that had spent a lifetime absorbing the cost of my family's dysfunction, went silent. And a new voice, one that was cold and clear and furious, spoke up. It said, "Oh no, you are not getting away with this." The rest of the party passed in a blur. I was on autopilot, a smiling, nodding automaton. I refilled drinks, laughed at jokes I didn't hear, and accepted compliments on how wonderful it was that I was so supportive of my sister. Every word felt like a tiny paper cut. They were praising a version of me that didn't exist. A selfless saint I had no interest in being anymore. The real me was a seething cauldron of indignation. Liam stuck by my side, a silent, solid presence. He knew me well enough to know that the explosion was coming. He was just helping me contain it until we were in a safe blast zone. The target of my rage, Claire, was blissfully unaware. She continued her victory lap around the garden, soaking up the adoration. At one point, she came over to me, looping her arm through mine. "Isn't this great?" she'd gushed, squeezing my arm. "Everyone is so happy for me." I looked at her, really looked at her. Her eyes were shining, her smile was wide and genuine. She wasn't faking her happiness. She believed it. She had so thoroughly convinced herself of her own narrative that there was no room for the truth. In her mind, she really had done it all herself. The $10,000 was just a minor detail, a bit of seed money that had been magically absorbed into the grand tapestry of her success, leaving no trace. "It's a lovely party," I said, my voice tight. She either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. "Oh, you have to see the pictures from my new apartment," she said, pulling out her phone. "I finally got the living room rug I was telling you about. It ties the whole room together." She swiped through the photos, showing me a chic, professionally decorated space that looked like it belonged in a magazine. And there it was, in the center of the room, a plush, expensive-looking rug. The very rug my mother had tried to guilt me into buying. So, not only had she lied about the handbag, she'd gone ahead and bought the rug anyway. With my money. The money that was supposed to be for rent and bills and necessities. I felt a wave of nausea. "It's very you," I managed to say. "I know, right?" She beamed. "I have such a good eye for these things." The drive home with Liam was silent for the first 20 minutes. I just stared out the window, watching the trees fly by, my anger a hot, solid ball in my chest. Finally, Liam spoke. "So," he said, his voice gentle, "what's the plan?" I turned to look at him. His face was calm, his eyes full of a fierce, protective loyalty that made me want to cry. He wasn't saying "I told you so." He was saying "I'm with you." "The plan," I said, the words tasting like metal, "is to get my money back. All of it. And then, the plan is to be done." He nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "Because what they're doing isn't family. It's theft. Emotional, financial. It's all the same." He was right. It was theft. They had been stealing from me my whole life. My money, my time, my peace of mind. They had robbed me of the chance to have a normal, reciprocal relationship with them. And I had let them. I had held the door open and helped them carry the loot to the getaway car. But not anymore. The getaway car was out of gas. The Bank of Victoria was officially, permanently, closed. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, my mind a whirlwind of past grievances and future confrontations. Every sacrifice, every ignored contribution, every time I'd swallowed my own needs for theirs, played on a loop in my head. The $50 for the school trip, the car, the laptop, the endless, countless small loans that were never repaid. They weren't just isolated incidents. They were a pattern, a carefully woven fabric of exploitation. The $10,000 wasn't the final straw. It was just the one that was too heavy to ignore. It had broken the camel's back, and the camel was finally ready to kick. The next morning, I woke up with a chilling sense of clarity. My anger had cooled overnight, hardening into a steely resolve. I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to scream or cry or make a scene. That's what they expected. They were comfortable with my emotions. They knew how to handle my tears. They would call me dramatic, oversensitive. They would gaslight me until I apologized for being upset. No, I was going to be calm. I was going to be rational. I was going to be everything they pretended I was. But this time, it would be for my own benefit. I found my parents in the kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the paper, just like any other Sunday morning. The normalcy of it was jarring. "Morning, sweetie," my dad said, not looking up from the sports section. "Did you sleep well?" "We need to talk," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the peaceful domestic scene like a knife. Both of them looked up, their faces a mixture of surprise and apprehension. They knew that tone. It was the tone I used when the furnace was broken or the car needed a new transmission. It was my problem-solving voice. "What is it, honey?" my mum asked, folding her section of the paper. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, sitting down at the table across from them. "It's not. It's about the $10,000 I gave to Claire." My dad sighed, a long, weary sound. "Victoria, we talked about this. It was to help her get started." "I know what it was for," I said, my gaze steady. "But it seems Claire has a different understanding of our arrangement. She seems to believe that money was a gift, or perhaps that it materialized out of thin air. She's telling people that she bought her new designer wardrobe and expensive home decor with her own hard-earned money." My mum had the grace to look uncomfortable. She shifted in her seat, avoiding my eyes. My dad, however, went on the offensive. "You're taking things too literally," he said, his voice taking on a patronizing edge. "She's just excited. She's proud of what she's accomplished." "What has she accomplished?" I asked, the question hanging in the air. "She got a job. That's wonderful. I helped her get to the city where the job is. I paid for her apartment deposit and her first month's rent. I furnished her apartment. What I did was an investment, a loan, and I expect to be paid back. But your daughter, my sister, is not only not paying me back, she's actively erasing me from the equation. She's taking credit for my financial contribution, and you are both enabling her." The conversation deteriorated from there, exactly as I knew it would. It was a masterclass in deflection and gaslighting, a performance they had been rehearsing for my entire life. My mother tried tears first. Her eyes welled up, her lower lip trembled. "I don't know why you're being so aggressive, Victoria," she whispered, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "We're a family. Why are you trying to turn this into some kind of business transaction?" It was a classic move. Frame my reasonable request for accountability as a cold, heartless attack on the sacred institution of family. For years, it had worked. I would see her tears and immediately feel a pang of guilt, a desperate need to smooth things over, to restore the peace at any cost. But this time, I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness where my guilt used to be. This became a business transaction the moment Claire decided to treat my money as her own personal slush fund, I said, my voice unwavering. "And family doesn't steal from family, Mum. They don't lie. They don't erase each other's kindness." My dad tried a different tactic. Righteous indignation. He puffed out his chest, his face flushing with anger. "You're being incredibly selfish," he boomed. "Claire is just starting out. She's under a lot of pressure. The last thing she needs is her own sister harassing her about money. You have a good job. You have a fiancé. You're comfortable. Why can't you just be happy for her and let it go?" This, too, was a familiar script. My stability was weaponized against me. Because I was responsible. Because I had built a secure life for myself. My needs and my money were considered less important. I was the family resource, a utility to be tapped whenever needed, and I was expected to do it with a smile. The idea that my money was mine, that I had plans for it, was an alien concept. "My financial situation is irrelevant," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "I could be a billionaire, and it would still be wrong. This is about respect. It's about the principle of the thing." I gave her that money in good faith, based on a promise she has clearly broken. I stood up. The kitchen felt small, suffocating. "This is what's going to happen," I said, looking from my mother's tear-streaked face to my father's thunderous one. "I am going to call Claire. I am going to inform her that I expect a formal repayment plan in writing by the end of the week. If I do not receive one, I will be taking further action." My dad scoffed. "Further action? What are you going to do, sue your own sister?" "Yes," I said without blinking, "if I have to. I have the bank transfer records and the text messages where she agrees it's a loan. It's a clear-cut case." The look on their faces was a mixture of shock and disbelief. They had never seen this version of me before. The compliant, peacekeeping Victoria was gone. In her place was a stranger, a woman who spoke of lawsuits and principles, a woman who would not be moved by tears or anger. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them in stunned silence. My heart was pounding, but for the first time in a long time, I felt powerful. I wasn't just reacting to their drama anymore. I was writing my own script. I called Claire immediately. I didn't want to give my parents time to call her first, to spin their own version of the story where I was the villain. I needed to strike while the iron was hot. She answered on the third ring, her voice bubbly and cheerful. "Hey Vic, what's up?" "Claire, we need to talk about the $10,000, I said, skipping the pleasantries. The line went silent for a moment. The bubbly energy vanished, replaced by a cautious, guarded tone. "Oh," she said. "Okay, what about it?" "I was under the impression that it was a loan," I continued, my voice calm and even. "A loan that you agreed to pay back. However, based on your recent spending habits and the stories you're telling our relatives, it seems you have a different interpretation." I could hear her take a sharp breath. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice a little too high. "I never said it wasn't a loan." "Really?" I asked, a hint of ice in my tone. "Because when you tell people you treated yourself to a multi-$1,000 handbag, it doesn't exactly scream I'm diligently paying back a substantial debt to my sister. When you buy expensive rugs instead of press, say, setting aside money for your first repayment, it sends a very clear message." She stumbled over her words, a flurry of excuses and justifications. The bag was on sale. The rug was an investment in her new life. I was misunderstanding. I was twisting her words. It was a pathetic, transparent performance. I let her flail for a minute before cutting her off. "I'm not interested in your excuses, Claire. I'm interested in a solution. I want a formal, written repayment plan. I want to know exactly how and when you intend to pay back the full $10,000. I want it in my email inbox by Friday." "That's not fair," she cried, her voice cracking. The victim card, right on cue. "I just started this job. I have so many expenses. You're putting so much pressure on me. You put this pressure on yourself when you chose to spend my money on luxuries instead of necessities," I retorted. "You had a choice, Claire. You could have been responsible. You could have been respectful. You chose not to be. These are the consequences." I could hear her starting to cry. It was the sound that had controlled me for years, the sound that had always made me back down. This time, it was just noise. "I can't believe you're doing this to me," she sobbed. "We're sisters." "Yes, we are," I said. "And as your sister, I'm giving you one last chance to do the right thing. Friday. Claire. If I don't have a plan from you by then, I will be sending a formal letter of demand from my lawyer, and then we can have a different kind of conversation." I hung up the phone before she could respond. My hand was shaking, but my resolve was firm. I had drawn a line in the sand, not with a stick, but with a bulldozer. There was no going back. Liam walked into the room then, holding a cup of coffee for me. He'd overheard the whole conversation. He didn't say a word. He just wrapped his arms around me, holding me tight. I leaned against him, the warmth of his embrace a stark contrast to the icy coldness I felt towards my family. I had just declared war, and I knew the first battle was over. But the war was just beginning. The week that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare, orchestrated by my parents. They deployed every weapon in their arsenal, and it was a formidable display. The first salvo was the guilt trip offensive. My mother called me every day, her voice thick with sorrow. She talked about how I was tearing the family apart, how my father was so stressed he couldn't sleep, how Claire was a nervous wreck. unable to focus at her new job because of the horrible pressure I was putting on her. She painted a picture of a family in turmoil, with me as the cruel, unfeeling architect of their misery. "I just don't understand what's gotten into you, Victoria," she'd say, her voice breaking. "You've always been the strong one, the one who holds us all together." It was a clever tactic. She was praising my old role while simultaneously punishing me for abandoning it. She was reminding me that my strength was only valued when it served them. When I used it for myself, it became a weapon against them. When the guilt trips didn't work, they moved on to phase 2, the flying monkey attack. This involved recruiting other family members to their cause. My Aunt Carol called, the one with the prize-winning roses. She'd been fed a carefully edited version of the story, one in which I, the wealthy and successful sister, was bullying my poor, struggling sibling over a small loan. "Victoria, dear," she'd started, her voice oozing with syrupy concern. "Your mother told me what's going on. I know you're probably just stressed with the wedding planning and all, but don't you think you're being a little hard on Claire?" I politely but firmly explained the reality of the situation. The size of the loan, the broken promises, the blatant lies. I could hear the surprise in her voice, as the narrative she'd been fed began to crumble. By the end of the call, she was stammering, saying she didn't realize and that she'd stay out of it. One monkey down. They tried it again with my Uncle Mark, my dad's brother. He was more direct. "Your dad's really upset, Vic," he said. "He says you're threatening to sue your sister. That's no way to handle family business." "Family business shouldn't involve $10,000 thefts," I replied coolly. I gave him the same rundown I'd given Aunt Carol. He was silent for a long time. "Well," he said finally, "when you put it that way, it does sound pretty bad." 2 monkeys down. It was exhausting. Each phone call felt like a battle, forcing me to defend my own sanity against their distorted reality. They were trying to isolate me, to make me feel like I was the crazy one, the unreasonable one. They wanted me to doubt myself, to crumble under the weight of the family's collective disapproval. But with every conversation, my resolve hardened. Hearing myself repeat the facts out loud, laying out the timeline of deceit, only reinforced the righteousness of my position. They weren't just wrong, they were fundamentally, morally bankrupt. And Liam was my rock through it all. Every time I got off the phone, shaken and furious, he would be there to listen. He'd let me vent, he'd validate my anger, and he'd remind me what was real. "They're trying to drag you back into the fog," he'd say. "But you're out now. Don't let them pull you back in." Friday came. My inbox remained stubbornly empty. There was no email from Claire, no repayment plan, no acknowledgement of her debt. It was a silent, defiant act of war. She was calling my bluff. She, and my parents, had made a calculation. They had weighed my history of caving against my newfound resolve, and they had bet on the former. They believed that when it came down to it, I wouldn't have the nerve to follow through. The old Victoria wouldn't have. She would have sighed, accepted the disappointment, and let the resentment fester into a quiet, manageable ulcer. But they had miscalculated. They had failed to account for the Liam factor, the catalyst who had held up a mirror and shown me the truth of my own reflection. They had failed to realize that you can only push a person so far before they stop retreating and start pushing back. I waited until 5 o'clock, just to be sure. Then, I picked up my phone and called my lawyer. I had found her online, a sharp-looking woman who specialized in civil litigation and had excellent reviews. I had already had a preliminary consultation, laying out the facts of the case. She had been blunt and professional. "It's a slam dunk," she'd said. "You have the transfer record. You have the texts. It's a clear breach of a verbal contract. The only question is how far you want to take it." Now, I had the answer. "Hi, Sarah," I said when she answered. "It's Victoria. We spoke on Tuesday about a personal loan issue." "Of course, Victoria. I remember. Any news from your sister?" "No," I said, a strange sense of calm settling over me. "Nothing. So I'd like to move forward. Please draft the letter of demand." "Consider it done," she said. I'll have it messengered to her apartment and a copy sent to your parents' address by tomorrow morning. It will state that she has 30 days to either repay the full amount or agree to a legally binding payment schedule. If she fails to respond, we file the lawsuit." I thanked her and hung up. I felt a profound sense of relief, as if a massive weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The decision was made. The action was taken. It was out of my hands now, in the sterile, logical world of the legal system. There would be no more tearful phone calls, no more gaslighting, no more emotional manipulation. There would only be facts, evidence, and consequences. That evening, Liam and I ordered pizza and opened a bottle of wine. We didn't talk about my family. We talked about our wedding, about our honeymoon plans, about the house we wanted to buy. We talked about our future, a future that was finally, blessedly, free from the toxic entanglement of my past. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control of my own story. I had spent years being a supporting character in the drama of my family. I had been the sensible sidekick, the reliable benefactor, the ever-present safety net. But I had quit the show, and I was finally ready to be the hero of my own life. The letter of demand was the first scene of my new story, and I couldn't wait to see how it ended. The arrival of a legal document has a way of cutting through the noise. It's a cold, hard piece of paper that can't be argued with, cried at, or guilt-tripped. It simply is. The letter of demand landed like a small bomb in my family's carefully constructed world of denial. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. My mother called me, and for the first time, I heard genuine panic in her voice. The manufactured sorrow was gone, replaced by a shrill, high-pitched hysteria. "Victoria, what have you done?" She shrieked into the phone. "A lawyer? You sent a lawyer's letter to your own sister? Are you insane?" "I told you I would," I said calmly. I gave her a deadline. She ignored it. "She's a mess. She called me crying her eyes out. She can't handle this kind of stress. You're destroying her." It was fascinating, in a horrifying way. Even now, faced with concrete legal consequences, their primary concern was not the debt, not the lie, but Claire's feelings. My feelings, my $10,000. My broken trust, none of that registered. The only thing that mattered was protecting Claire from the consequences of her own actions. "Claire is an adult," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "She made a decision, and now she has to deal with the outcome. This is how the real world works, Mum. It's a lesson she should have learned a long time ago." My dad got on the phone then, his voice a low growl. "You've gone too far, Victoria. You've crossed a line." "The line was crossed when you all decided my money was your money," I shot back. "The line was crossed when you taught my sister that promises don't matter and that she could treat me with utter disrespect. This isn't me crossing a line. This is me drawing one." He started yelling then. A torrent of accusations and insults. I was ungrateful. I was cruel. I was tearing the family apart out of spite. It was the desperate rage of a man who has lost control, and for the first time, it didn't intimidate me. It just sounded pathetic. I held the phone away from my ear, listening to him rant, and I felt a strange sense of pity for him. His entire world was built on a foundation of manipulation and control, and I had just kicked out the cornerstone. His power over me was gone, and he had nothing left but empty noise. "Are you done?" I asked when he finally paused to take a breath. He was momentarily speechless. "Good," I said. "From now on, all communication regarding this matter will go through my lawyer. Do not call me about this again." And I hung up. I blocked their numbers. Not out of anger, but out of a deep, profound need for peace. I had said everything I needed to say. The rest would be handled by professionals. It was a strange and liberating feeling. For my entire life, my family had been a constant presence, a loud, demanding chorus in the background of my life, and with a few taps on my phone, I had silenced them. The quiet was beautiful. The 30 days stipulated in the letter of demand passed in blissful silence. My parents and sister respected my communication blackout, likely on the advice of whatever lawyer they had scrambled to hire. It was a strange, peaceful limbo. Liam and I moved forward with our lives. We booked our wedding venue, a beautiful old barn in the countryside. We met with caterers and florists. We spent our weekends hiking and dreaming about the future. It felt like I was breathing fresh air for the first time in years. I was surprised by how little I missed them. I had always assumed that cutting them off would leave a gaping hole in my life, a painful amputation. But it wasn't like that at all. It was more like removing a splinter that had been lodged under my skin for so long. I'd forgotten what it felt like to not be in constant, low-grade pain. The absence of their drama, their demands, their endless draining neediness, was a balm to my soul. I realized how much of my mental and emotional energy had been consumed by managing them. Now, with that energy freed up, I felt lighter, more focused, more myself. On the 31st day, I got an email from my lawyer, Sarah. It was short and to the point. They've responded. They've agreed to a full repayment of the $10,000, plus my legal fees. They want to wire the money tomorrow. Congratulations. I stared at the email, a slow smile spreading across my face. I had won. It wasn't just about the money. It was a victory for every time I had been dismissed, ignored, and taken for granted. It was validation. It was proof that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't being unreasonable. I was right. Liam came up behind me and read the email over my shoulder. He kissed the top of my head. "I knew you could do it," he said. "I'm so proud of you." I leaned back against him, feeling a wave of gratitude so intense it almost brought me to tears. He hadn't just supported me, he had empowered me. He had given me the courage to fight a battle I had been conditioned to lose. The next day, the money appeared in my bank account. $10,000, plus the exact amount of Sarah's invoice. It was a sterile, impersonal transaction, the final, definitive end to a lifetime of messy, emotional entanglement. I immediately transferred the full amount from our joint account back into our house savings fund. I looked at the balance, the number solid and real, and, for the first time, completely safe from the grasping hands of my family. It was our money, our future, and no one was ever going to touch it again. I thought that would be the end of the story. I was wrong. The real end, the part that would bring me a sense of vindication I never could have imagined, was still to come. A few months passed. The wedding planning was in full swing, a happy, exciting whirlwind that consumed most of my attention. I hadn't heard a word from my family, and I was more than okay with that. As far as I was concerned, that chapter of my life was closed, the book slammed shut and placed on a high, dusty shelf. Then, one afternoon, I got a text from my cousin Amy. She was one of the few relatives who had stayed neutral during the whole ordeal, a quiet observer on the sidelines. The text was a link to a Facebook post. "You should probably see this," she wrote. My heart sank. I clicked the link, a sense of dread washing over me. It took me to Claire's Facebook page. The post was public. It was a long, rambling essay, accompanied by a photo of her looking wistfully out a window. It was a masterpiece of revisionist history. In her version of events, she was the hero of a dramatic tale of struggle and perseverance. She wrote about the challenges of starting over in a new city, the crushing weight of financial pressure, the loneliness of being independent. She talked about working tirelessly, saving every penny, making sacrifices. She painted a vivid picture of a young woman pulling herself up by her bootstraps, fueled by nothing but grit and determination. And then came the kicker. "It hasn't been easy," she wrote. "There were times I thought I wouldn't make it. I even had to take a small loan from my parents, which I'm proud to say I've already paid back in full. It just goes to show that with hard work and a belief in yourself, you can achieve anything. I'm so grateful for my own strength and resilience. I earned this." I had to read it twice. A small loan, from her parents, paid back in full. She had not only erased me from the narrative, she had replaced me with our parents, the very people who had enabled her deceit. She had taken my $10,000, my legal threat, my hard-won victory, and twisted it into a feel-good story about her own imaginary strength. The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a lie of such epic proportions that it was almost impressive. She hadn't just bent the truth, she had broken it, shattered it, and rearrange the pieces into a mosaic of self-serving fiction. I felt a surge of white-hot rage, so intense it made me dizzy. I wanted to comment on the post, to unleash a torrent of truth that would blow her pathetic little story to smithereens. I wanted to post screenshots of the bank transfer, the text messages, the lawyer's letter. I wanted to expose her to everyone she knew. Liam found me sitting on the couch, my phone clenched in my hand, my whole body shaking with fury. He read the post, his expression growing darker with every word. When he was done, he took the phone from my hand and set it on the table. "Don't," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Don't engage. It's what she wants. She wants a reaction. She wants to drag you back into the drama." "But she's lying," I sputtered. "She's telling everyone she did it herself. She's taking credit for what I did." "I know," he said, pulling me into a hug. "And we know the truth. And you know what? The truth has a way of coming out." Liam was right. Engaging with Claire's post would have been a mistake. It would have made me look like the crazy, bitter sister, just as my parents had always tried to paint me. It would have been playing her game, by her rules, and I was done playing games. So, I did nothing. I didn't comment. I didn't text. I didn't call anyone to complain. I took a deep breath, and I let it go. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. Every instinct screamed at me to fight back, to defend my honor, to set the record straight. But a deeper, wiser part of me, the part that had been strengthened by the battles I had already won, knew that silence was the most powerful weapon I had. My silence was a statement. It said, "You are not worth my energy. Your lies have no power over me. I am moving on with my life." A few days later, something interesting happened. My cousin Amy, the one who had sent me the link, posted a comment on Claire's self-congratulatory essay. It was simple, innocuous, just 6 words. "Wow, that's amazing, Claire, congratulations." But I knew Amy, and I knew that her enthusiastic exclamation point-laden comment was dripping with sarcasm. Amy had been at the party. She had seen the new handbag. She had heard the stories. She knew that Claire's tale of heroic self-sufficiency was a work of fiction. Her comment wasn't a validation. It was a quiet little jab, a subtle calling out of the lie. Then, another comment appeared, from my Uncle Mark, the one who had initially called to scold me but had backed down after hearing my side of the story. "Good for you, Claire," he wrote. "Hard work pays off." Again, on the surface, it was a supportive comment, but I could read between the lines. He knew the truth too. He knew that the hard work she was talking about was mine. These comments were not the public shaming I had initially craved. They were something much more subtle and, ultimately, more satisfying. They were quiet little pockets of truth in a sea of lies. They were acknowledgements from the people who mattered, the people who had taken the time to listen to both sides of the story. They were proof that Claire's narrative wasn't as solid as she thought it was. She could control what she posted, but she couldn't control what people knew. She had built her castle of lies on a foundation of sand, and the tide was slowly, quietly, starting to come in. It was a slow, creeping vindication, and it was sweeter than any angry outburst could have been. I was learning a valuable lesson. Sometimes, the best way to win a war is to let your enemy defeat themselves. The wedding was a month away, and the final preparations were a welcome distraction. We had to finalize the guest list, a task I was dreading. Liam and I sat down one evening with a spreadsheet and a bottle of wine. "Okay," he said. "Let's start with the easy ones, your side." I took a deep breath. "They're not invited." Liam looked at me, his expression unreadable. "All of them? Your parents? Your sister?" "None of them," I said, my voice firm. I can't stand up there and say my vows, promise a life of love and honesty with you. With them in the front row, it would feel like a lie. The whole day would be tainted by their presence. I don't want to spend my wedding day watching my back, waiting for the next passive-aggressive comment or manufactured drama. I want to be happy. I want to be present. And I can't be, not with them there. It was a hard decision, and a part of me felt a pang of sadness for the family I wished I had. The family that would have been celebrating with me, genuinely and without agenda. But I had to be realistic. I had to protect my own peace. My wedding was not an opportunity for them to perform their roles as the loving family. It was my day, and I was going to fill it with people who truly loved and supported me. "Okay," Liam said, reaching across the table and taking my hand. "I support you. It's your decision. But are you prepared for the consequences?" I knew what he meant. The fallout from this would be nuclear. Disowning your family is one thing. Not inviting them to your wedding is a public declaration of war. It's a statement that cannot be ignored or explained away. "I am," I said. "Whatever they do, whatever they say, it can't be worse than what they've already done. I'm choosing my future, Liam, and my future is with you. It's a future free of their toxicity." So we made the list. My friends, my chosen family. Liam's family, who had been nothing but kind and welcoming to me, and a few of my own relatives, the ones who had shown me support, like Amy and Uncle Mark. It was a smaller list than we had originally planned, but it was a list filled with love and integrity. A few weeks before the wedding, I got a call from my Aunt Carol. She was in a panic. "Victoria, I just got your invitation. It's beautiful, but your parents didn't get one. Was there a mistake?" "No, Aunt Carol," I said gently. "There was no mistake. They're not invited." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "But you can't do that. They're your parents. It's your wedding." "I can, and I am," I said. "My wedding is a celebration of love and commitment. I'm only inviting people who understand and respect those values." I explained my reasoning, calmly and without anger. I told her about the lies, the manipulation, the complete lack of remorse. I told her that I had to choose my own well-being. She listened, and to my surprise, she understood. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice soft with sympathy. "I had no idea it was that bad. I'm so sorry you've had to go through that." The conversation ended with her promising to be there, to support me. It was another small victory, another crack in the facade of my family's perfect image. The truth was spreading, not because I was shouting it from the rooftops, but because my actions were speaking for themselves. My decision to not invite my family was not an act of revenge. It was an act of self-preservation. It was the ultimate boundary, a line drawn not in the sand, but in concrete, and on the other side of that line was my new life, a life of peace, love, and authenticity. The wedding day was perfect. The sun was shining, the old barn was decorated with fairy lights and wildflowers, and the air was filled with laughter and love. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. Surrounded by people who genuinely cared for us, I felt a sense of peace and joy that was so profound it was almost overwhelming. There was no drama, no tension, no one looking at me with pity or judgment. Just pure, unadulterated happiness. I didn't think about my family once. They were a world away, a distant memory from a life that no longer belonged to me. My cousin Amy came up to me during the reception, a glass of champagne in her hand. "You're glowing," she said, giving me a hug. "I've never seen you look so happy." "I've never been so happy," I said, and I meant it. "By the way," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "you're not going to believe this." She pulled out her phone and showed me another Facebook post from Claire. It had been posted that morning. It was a picture of Claire and my parents, all three of them dressed up, smiling brightly at a fancy restaurant. The caption read, "So sad to be missing my sister's wedding day, but some of us have to work to maintain our responsibilities. So proud of my own little family unit for always supporting each other. Enjoying a well-deserved celebration of our own." It was a pathetic, transparent attempt to save face, to control the narrative. They couldn't stand the thought of people knowing they had been excluded, so they had created their own counter-event, their own sad little party of three. They were trying to pretend that their absence was their choice, a noble sacrifice on the altar of responsibility. Old me would have been furious. The old me would have let it ruin my day. But the new me, the happy, married and free me, just laughed. I looked at the picture of them, with their forced smiles and their desperate attempt to project an image of happiness, and I felt nothing but pity. They were trapped in their own web of lies, their own toxic little bubble, while I was here, in the real world, surrounded by genuine love. "Let them have their little party," I said to Amy, handing her back the phone. "I have everything I need right here." I looked across the dance floor to where Liam was laughing with his brothers. He caught my eye and smiled, a smile that reached his eyes and filled my heart. He was my family now. He was my home. The rest was just noise. Later that night, as Liam and I were leaving the reception, running through a tunnel of sparklers held by our friends and family, I felt a sense of closure so complete it was almost physical. I had not only survived the war with my family, I had won. And the prize was not $10,000. It was my life, my freedom, my peace. And it was worth every single battle. The honeymoon was 2 weeks of blissful disconnection in a small, sun-drenched villa in Italy. We turned off our phones, ignored our emails, and simply existed. We ate pasta, drank wine, explored ancient ruins, and fell even more deeply in love. It was a perfect start to our new life together, a life that felt a million miles away from the drama and dysfunction of my past. When we returned, rested and happy, reality intruded in the form of a large manila envelope in our mailbox. It was from my Aunt Carol. Inside was a thick stack of papers and a short, handwritten note. "Victoria," the note read, "I thought you should have these. I don't think your parents know I have copies. Use them as you see fit. Love, Carol." I looked at the papers, my heart beginning to pound. They were financial documents, bank statements, loan applications, credit card bills. My parents' financial records, dating back years. I didn't understand. Why would Aunt Carol have these? Why was she giving them to me? I read her note again. "I don't think your parents know I have copies." And then I remembered something my mum had told me years ago, in a moment of rare, unguarded honesty. Aunt Carol's husband, my Uncle Robert, was an accountant. For a while, before my parents' finances had become a complete and utter train wreck, he had handled their taxes. He must have kept their records. And Carol, my quiet, rose-growing aunt, had just handed me the keys to the kingdom. Liam and I spent the next few hours poring over the documents, and the picture they painted was even uglier than I could have imagined. It was a landscape of breathtaking irresponsibility. They had taken out second and third mortgages on their house, the house I had grown up in. They had maxed out dozens of credit cards, all with astronomical interest rates. They had defaulted on loans. They were drowning in a sea of debt so deep it was almost impossible to comprehend. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the why. I saw the statements for the luxury vacations they had taken, the expensive dinners they had eaten, the designer clothes they had bought, and then I saw the transfers. Dozens and dozens of them, over the course of years, money being funneled from their accounts, from their loans, from their credit cards, directly into Claire's bank account. It wasn't just my $10,000. It was a lifetime of funding. They hadn't just been careless. They had systematically bankrupted themselves to finance my sister's lifestyle. They had sacrificed their own financial security, their own future, for her. And they had used me to plug the holes in their sinking ship, to keep the whole charade going just a little bit longer. The $10,000 I had loaned Claire hadn't been for a deposit on an apartment. It had likely gone to pay off one of her many credit cards, a debt incurred from a life I had unknowingly been subsidizing for years. It was a shell game, and I had been the unwitting mark. I felt a wave of cold, hard fury wash over me, but it was different from the anger I had felt before. This was not the hot, personal anger of betrayal. This was the cold, impersonal anger of discovery. I finally understood. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. I was just collateral damage in their obsessive, pathological devotion to my sister. The documents were a revelation. They were the missing piece of the puzzle, the key that unlocked the entire twisted logic of my family's universe. It wasn't that they loved Claire more than me. It was that their relationship with her was built on a foundation of financial appeasement. They weren't parents. They were patrons. And she wasn't a daughter. She was a dependent, a very expensive hobby they couldn't afford but refused to give up. Their desperation, their constant state of crisis, their manipulation, it all made sense now. They weren't just trying to keep up appearances. They were trying to keep the entire fragile structure from collapsing. My role in this ecosystem was simple. I was the emergency fund. I was the responsible one, the one with the good job and the savings account, and my resources were there to be tapped whenever their primary investment, Claire, required another infusion of cash. My $10,000 loan was not an isolated event. It was just the largest and most recent transaction in a long and sordid history. The discovery changed everything. It lifted the last lingering vestiges of guilt and self-doubt from my shoulders. I had spent so many years wondering what was wrong with me, why I was never good enough, why my accomplishments were ignored while Claire's were celebrated. Now I knew. It had nothing to do with me. I was just a line item in their budget, a resource to be managed. Armed with this new understanding, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. It was about consequences. It was about bringing the whole rotten structure crashing down, for my own sake, and maybe, just maybe, for theirs too. My lawyer, Sarah, was shocked when I presented her with the documents. She spread them out on her conference table, her expression growing more grim with each page she read. "This is extensive," she said, her voice a mixture of professional interest and personal disgust. "This is a pattern of behavior that goes far beyond a simple family dispute. This is fraud," she explained the legal options to me. "With this evidence, we could prove that my parents and sister had engaged in a long-term conspiracy to defraud me. The $10,000 loan was just one part of it. We could take them to court, not just for my money, but for punitive damages. We could expose the entire scheme. It will be messy," she warned me. "It will be public, and it will be brutal. Are you sure you want to do this?" I looked at the papers, at the black and white proof of their decades of deceit. I thought about the little girl who had given up her school trip for a sequined tutu. I thought about the young woman who had worked 2 jobs to build a safety net for people who saw her as nothing more than a safety net. I thought about the woman who had been made to feel selfish and cruel for simply asking for what was rightfully hers. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I'm sure." The lawsuit was filed. The legal process, which had once seemed so intimidating, was now my shield and my sword. It was a world of facts and evidence, a world where emotional manipulation had no currency. My parents and Claire were served with papers that detailed, in excruciatingly precise legal language, their years of financial deception. The reaction was predictable. They tried to fight it, of course. Their lawyer filed motions to dismiss, claiming it was a frivolous family matter, a daughter's temper tantrum. But the evidence was irrefutable. The bank statements, the loan applications, the credit card bills. They told a story that could not be denied. The case dragged on for months, a slow, grinding process of depositions and discoveries. I had to sit in a room with my sister and my parents, with lawyers present, and listen to them lie under oath. They tried to paint me as a vindictive, money-grubbing shrew. They claimed the financial transfers to Claire were gifts, expressions of parental love. They denied ever asking me for money, ever presenting their requests as loans. But the documents didn't lie, and my text messages, the ones where Claire explicitly agreed to pay me back, didn't lie either. Their case crumbled under the weight of the evidence. Their lawyer, seeing the writing on the wall, advised them to settle. The settlement conference was the final, pathetic scene in their long-running drama. We sat in a sterile conference room, on opposite sides of a large mahogany table. My parents looked old and defeated. The fight had gone out of them, replaced by a weary resignation. Claire just stared at the table, her face pale and drawn. She looked small and insignificant, stripped of her designer clothes and her unearned confidence. My lawyer laid out our terms. We weren't just asking for the $10,000 anymore. We were asking for a full accounting of every dollar they had ever taken from me under false pretenses. We were asking for damages. We were asking for them to sell their house, the house that was so far underwater it was practically a submarine, to pay off their debts, including the debt to me. They had no choice but to agree. The house was sold. The proceeds were used to pay off their creditors, with my settlement taking priority. It wasn't a windfall. After everything was said and done, I got my $10,000 back, plus enough to cover my extensive legal fees and a little extra for the emotional distress. But it was never about the money. It was about the truth. It was about accountability. It was about watching their empire of lies, built on a foundation of my money and my good nature, crumble into dust. They had to move into a small rented apartment. They had to get jobs, real jobs, for the first time in decades. Claire had to learn what it meant to actually live on her own salary, without the safety net of her parents' credit cards or her sister's savings. The golden child had finally been forced to grow up. I haven't spoken to them since the settlement. I have no idea what their lives are like now, and I have no desire to find out. I have chosen peace. I have chosen to move on. Liam and I bought our house. It's not a mansion, but it's ours. We painted the walls, planted a garden, and filled it with love and laughter. It's a home built on a foundation of honesty and partnership, a sanctuary from the storms of the past. Sometimes I think about what I lost. I lost a family. I lost the idea of a mother and a father and a sister who would love me unconditionally. But then I think about what I gained. I gained self-respect. I gained a husband who is my true partner in every sense of the word. I gained a future that is my own, to build as I see fit. I gained my life back. The other day, I was cleaning out an old box of photos, and I found a picture of me and Claire as little girls. We were sitting on a swing set, our arms around each other, smiling for the camera. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for the sister I thought I had, the relationship I thought we could have. But then I remembered the lies, the manipulation, the cold, hard truth of who she really is. And I put the picture back in the box and closed the lid. I am not that little girl anymore. I am not the family ATM. I am not the designated driver at the demolition derby. I am Victoria. I am a wife. I am a homeowner. I am a woman who knows her own worth. And I am finally, blessedly, free. So, I have to ask you, after hearing my story, after seeing the full picture, do you think I went too far? Or did I not go far enough? Let me know in the comments.